Madam Clerk? Oh, we're called to order. Oh, okay. No roll call yet. We all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, roll call.
Member Hurley?
Here.
Member Young?
Here.
Member Daschle? Chair Lowry?
Here.
And then for the Planning Board, we have Member Perry? Here. Member Hubbard?
Here.
Member Angelides? Here. Member Grocott? Here. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think y'all are aware of why we're here today. Brandon prepared this lovely little sheet here that tells us a bit of the overview. Very succinct and well done. It would take an hour for me to say all that stuff, so it would make sense. And Brandon, I think you're going to pretty much go forward with the beginning, and we'll have kind of an overview of that kind of thing, and then we'll decide. I mean, if you have any questions, that's what we're here for, to answer how we received this. I assume you've all got copies of the proposed changes. Hopefully you've read them, but we'll certainly go over all of them at this point. So, Brandon, you want to take over?
Sure, and welcome to our new members. I didn't want to take too much time. The PowerPoint that unfortunately we can't get up on the screen today, but I just wanted to briefly cover the overview of what got us to this point and some of the major changes of the two divisions that we're going to be talking about today. So this has been a 2-year process with the Historic Preservation Board. We are looking at amendments to better align the district standards with the original purpose and intent, both of the Paso Grill District and the Community Redevelopment District, 8th Avenue. The intent of that is really to preserve the existing bona fide historic structures, those that are locally designated or designated as part of the district in the Paso Grill overlay, develop new structures that are compatible with the area, so when there is redevelopment that they look and they fit in with the context of the other properties. And to respect the unique pre-zoning character of Paso Grill, there are a lot of permissions in Paso Grill related to allowing multifamily structures and mixed use block by block that you don't see elsewhere in the city. So the intent's really to preserve that through these amendments. Currently, the city has a design review process. We actually have a design review scheduled today for the regular historic board meeting, but we're looking at adding more robust design standards with qualified review by an architect rather than just staff. And ensuring that when lots are consolidated, especially along 8th Avenue, that they are done in a way that is careful with the context and with the character of the area, making sure that they respect the historic layout of Paso Grill. So some of the major changes in the Paso Grill Overlay District, we have 2 divisions we're talking about today. There are really 3 that are relevant to the Paso Grill area, but the Division 28 is the Historic Preservation Ordinance. That is not being addressed through any of the amendments that the Historic Preservation Board has undertaken. They focus primarily on Division 20, which is an overlay division for most of Paso Grill, and then Division 40, which is specific to the 8th Avenue area. It's all of the properties along 8th Avenue, all of the properties on the south side of 9th Avenue, and then several of the properties along 7th Avenue on the north side. So for the major changes to the Paso Grill overlay, again, it's most properties south of 32nd, excluding the Community Redevelopment District 8th Avenue, as well as the marina, the restaurant just south of the Vina Del Mar Bridge, and the city's fire station lot. The biggest change is that building to the overlay will now be a requirement. Previously and currently, the overlay is an option. It's something that property owners who are building a single-family home have the option to build to the overlay, the heightened design standards, or they could build to the typical suburban standards of a residential home. The requirement would now be to build to the overlay. The board is looking at strengthened standards for design review, like I just mentioned. So design standard identification would actually be on the plans instead of just verbal at hearings. The city would have an architect actually look these standards over to make sure that they're being met. And the city is in the process of looking at putting together a design guidebook that is forthcoming. We don't have that ready yet, but it's something we would be looking at having as a more modular adoption along with the overlay. Currently, there are no standards related to where driveways need to be placed on a new single-family lot. These changes would make it so that any lot with an alleyway that is accessible and more than 15 feet wide would be required to have the driveway in the rear of the property. This would allow for street parking, allow for the maintenance of that historic frontage along the avenues. Any lot consolidation or subdivision would require Historic Preservation Board review. Currently, it's required by the City Commission. This would add another step. The Historic Preservation Board would review any kind of lot split or combination of property for development purposes before it moves on to City Commission. And the final major change, there are other elements that we're addressing, but it would prohibit any kind of accessory structure in the front yard. Currently, if a site is set, or a home is set back far enough, there could be a garage in the front yard, a pool, other accessory structures. This would move all of the accessory structures to the backyard.
Brandon, Tara's on now.
Great. And Tara Salmieri, she is our consultant for this. She'd be happy to answer questions. Moving on to the 8th Avenue, major changes are design standard implementation. Despite 8th Avenue being historic in character, most of the structures along 8th Avenue are on either the local historic registry or designated as part of the district. There are not actually any design standards currently for new development along 8th Avenue. This would move the Pastor Grill overlay design standards onto 8th Avenue. They are more or less mirrored between the two divisions. Any kind of rooftop mechanical equipment would need to be screened. There was a recent development recently where there was not screening. It's something that moving forward, any new development, you shouldn't be able to see the mechanical equipment from the street if you're standing there as a pedestrian. It would go through design review, the same as the Pastor Grill overlay. The request would come forward to the Historic Preservation Board for review. And it would also, and this is in line with what I was just mentioning related to the subdivision and lot consolidation, it would set a maximum building length. It would prevent anyone being able to come in to buy up half a block and then consolidate all the properties and develop one building that just runs the entire block face. The city's development standards for 8th Avenue promote putting buildings very close to the street and having them be accessible from the sidewalk, but it would prevent just an entire block-wide development and overdevelopment of that block. There would need to be breaks between buildings, both to preserve the alleyways as well as just to preserve the design intent of the overlay. So that's all I really have. I just wanted to really summarize the main points, what got us here today. This has been about a 2-year process. This will come back to the planning board for a formal vote. We were looking at setting up a workshop between the Historic Preservation Board and the planning board. From this, it'll move on to a workshop with the Historic Preservation Board and the City Commission, and then in the future, we'll bring this back to you. There's quite a bit of content here. We just wanted to have an opportunity to go through if you had any questions, if you had any suggestions that we can look into before it comes forward to you for a formal vote. Chair, anything else you'd like?
I don't think so. We've kind of set it up this way. Obviously, this is fairly complex, and I'm sure you hopefully have some questions about where we're going. I think one of the things we noticed that pretty much everything that existed in the code was okay and actually worked, although I thought maybe we didn't enforce some of the things as well as we possibly could. And I think we're getting more, for lack of a better word, cooperation in doing that as we go forward anyway. So these are just more areas that I think tweak what we already have. And there's reasons behind all these. And so I'd prefer if you all maybe would ask some questions, maybe that'll open up the discussions of certain areas. So can we go forward that way? If not, you know, we can just talk about, I think we should start about 8th Avenue first, which is the CRDEA. And I didn't know this for a long time when I was on the historic board. Well, y'all understand the Pastor Grill overlay supposedly applies to everything south of 32nd Avenue, which is, you know, a couple blocks south of the Don. But in reality, it doesn't. There's certain areas that are zoned to be in the overlay and certain areas that are not in the overlay. 8th Avenue, before that was rezoned, that area, it was zoned differently, but it was in the overlay. And when they created the CRDEA, they removed it from the overlay. And part of the glaring problem with that was they also removed all the historic language that goes with the overlay. And so that was a glaring omission, I think, that we needed to rectify. So now we're trying to add language to the CRD Section 40 that mirrors more the overlay, since it's not technically in the overlay, but it's the heart and soul of Pass and Grill, really. That's the most important area that the historical aspect has to be provided for. So that's the main change in Section 40, although there might be some individual things. I know Brandon mentioned some. So dealing with Section 40 itself, does anybody have any questions as to why we are making these recommendations?
I think my first question would be, just after watching your meeting last month, the recurring theme was we have no teeth to enforce any of this. Are these changes going to solve that?
Yes and no. Okay. It's going to tighten things up, and by adding mostly language in what's in both the overlay and Section 40, it puts the onus more on the builder to show us the languages, and that I think Tara came up with that, which was really good, that they have to show in their application how their proposed plans fit into the compatibility and historic nature of Pass Grill. And so I think that puts them certainly on notice that it can't be ignored, because what was happening, if you watch the meeting, then you know that a lot of what's happening when people had the option to build either under the zone or the overlay, they'd choose the overlay because it allowed them to build a bigger house, because the overlay allows for different setbacks due to the unique nature of the small lots at the overlay. Well, so they're building this giant houses max to the very max, but not following the recommendations that we want it to be historical and be compatible, because there was no teeth in that. Follow what I'm saying? So the spirit of that, I think, was being technically violated, but they could do that and so some people don't. Many people build, historical looking, beautiful houses, just kind of up to the builder themselves. So I think what we're doing now doesn't give us necessarily the teeth, because we're only a recommendation, we're advisory board, but it puts the public on more notice of what we want, and it allows us, along with the design guidebook, I think, to be able to, the architect or whoever is from the city, to reject some of the plans if they aren't fitting within that. What you're asking, like getting more teeth, is a whole nother thing we would have. We're just trying to tighten up what we have existing right now.
Right.
I think in the future, as time goes on, we may want to look, depending on the feel of the public, we may want to change things, but for the moment, I think the first step is just to clean up what we already have. Make sense?
And then additionally, currently, if you were building to your zone, what you were zoned in and not to the overlay, you weren't required to come to Historic Preservation Board. Although we've changed that with the resolution, and we at least present it to this board, but if everything comes under the overlay, every build will come to this board. Whereas right now, only if you're building to the overlay is required.
Right. I mean, and actually, the way it was written, that was discretionary on the city to even show us that, the overlay builds. But they always did, but we weren't seeing the underlying zone builds, which, in other words, the homes you could build north of the Don, you can still build down in Pass Grill, even though they don't really necessarily look like Pass Grill, okay? Which is very, there's a lot of different styles down there. But another problem, and this goes, to section 20, is that when builders had, or owners had, the choice of building under the overlay or the underlying zone, you might get, and there's a perfect example I can show you a picture of, where two new homes were built side by side, one under the overlay and one under the underlying zone. Well, the underlying zone one had to abide by setbacks, which put the house further back, so they had a view out their front window, and they could see to the south, and et cetera. They could see the beach, and then the house right next door to it built under the overlay, and they're allowed to build 10 foot out towards the sidewalk, thereby eliminating the whole view, and so this doesn't necessarily rectify that, but it prevents that kind of from happening in the future, so we'll have more consistency of the homes that are built and not have that kind of staggered back and forth look. You know, in that particular example, not only is the house built under the overlay come out 10 feet further in the front, it comes out about 5 feet further in the back. It just, and that's the downside, I think, is the overlay does allow bigger houses, which, you know, but I think when we add these design reviews and the design guidebook, which will have a lot of examples of the older homes there. And I'm sure you all have been down there. You can see them. You can see a brand new house. Some of them are fit in perfect. Some are, you know, okay, and some are just kind of like, you know, I refer to them as, you know, they're nice architectural homes, and they may be beautifully designed, but are they compatible with the historic district? You know, and I think that's what we're not telling people what color to paint their house and stuff like that. It's just a matter of trying to make the mass and scale be compatible with everything else, which these ordinances have always said that, but we haven't really, you know, had the enforcement aspect of it.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. Like that house last month that's slated to replace the one in disrepair.
Yep.
It obviously didn't fit what you envisioned, but all you could really do is change the garage door facade. So this won't solve that problem.
I think it would help solve that problem. It doesn't solve that particular problem.
Right.
But what it does is when a builder is going to look at what they have to do, they're going to see that, as again I said, they have to show how that home fits the intent of the historic neighborhood. And if you recall that meeting, the architect, it was, you know, very nice, and, you know, I asked her, well, how is that compatible? And she basically said, well, there's maybe 5 other houses like that. So clearly they'd already done their homework, because they knew what they were building was a modern home, you know, or I call it the Jetson home, you know, and then there's a few down there. And, you know, it's eclectic, it's okay, but I think if you're gonna seriously have a historic district, then we have to, you know, be serious about it. And so I think all of these, and if you want to be, like Brandon talked about the alleys, if you're down to Pass Grill, the southern end of Pass Grill, basically south of 10th, is the really old area, and it's all, the homes there are probably, except for the new ones, are all 100 years old. And they were all built using the alleys in the back. So you didn't have a garage facing the street, you didn't have a driveway facing the street, you didn't have a curb cut taking away a parking space in front of the street. And I'm sure that's what the alleys are for. As time went on, I think we kind of forgot about that, and there's just a few houses that have been built recently where, you know, they have a garage that faces the front street, they have a curb cut that takes away a spot, they got a driveway that has their car or golf cart parked in it, and, you know, that's just the way things are. And they don't even use the alley. And so I think that's something that we would like to make a requirement. And I think, Brandon, we talked about it. We had a question a while ago whether 15 feet, all the alleys, it's really the east-west alleys we're talking about more than the north-south alleys, are 15 feet. And I think most of them are that way, and we might have to modify that if some. The idea would be, can you get your car through there? And it may require another side effect, may be requiring the city to clean up some of those east-west alleys to make sure we have egress and, you know, along there. So, like, any other questions on?
Mr. Larry, you just said the architect could I believe you used the word reject a plan. So, is the architect working for the city? Is he working with one of the panels? Who is the architect working with? And
It'd be,
at what point is he involved with the process?
okay, my understanding is that would be someone that's employed by the city, okay? And maybe reject is too strong a word. I think the idea would be, well, I don't think it is too strong a word. I don't think the way it's set up now, if somebody, for example, couldn't show how the house is compatible to the historic district, then I think the architect could reject those plans. I mean, that's going to be something that goes on kind of behind closed doors that, you know, we aren't really a part of, but it certainly puts all the builders on notice. I mean, one argument would be was, why would anybody, reasonable person, let's say, want to buy a house in Paso Grill, which is going to be, a lot's going to be very expensive, and the charm and uniqueness is the historical nature of it. So why would somebody want to build it, or buy a house there, and then just build this structure that doesn't get along at all? And I think sometimes it's because they don't really have the right notice, or, you know, they're out of state, they hire an architect out of state, they come down, and, you know, then they've got their money on their plans and they want to build it. So I think the guidelines that set out, these new guidelines, it's going to put a lot more notice in their behalf that I don't think you'll have as much behavior like that anyway. I think, so although I don't think it says the words reject in the proposed changes, it does talk about acceptance or recommendations.
So sequencing, it would go to the city first, then to the architect review, then to this panel, then to the Board of Adjustments according to this, and then to the commission?
No.
A split assembly or anything like that?
Oh, you mean that kind of stuff? Yes. Yeah, the lot splits and combination would. And that's always kind of been part of, I believe, and I'm not an expert in all this kind of stuff, I think a lot of that was part of the regular lots in the non-historic areas of St. Pete Beach. And I think when the CRD was created, it kind of forgot to talk about that. You know, and so even though when it was the overlay, it was talked about. And so what we were concerned about is people buying lots and just putting them together without any citizen overview, and that ultimately means the commission or other board. And again, we're only advisory as far as that goes. But that seemed to be a loophole, if you want to say it, that kind of got forgotten, I think, that we're trying to tighten up.
And as far as when somebody owns a lot, purchases a lot, and then has a design that is not approved legally, and this is for the lawyer, then legally we're covered because that is up to a real estate agent to disclose to a potential buyer what their parameters are for what they're able to put on that lot prior to acquiring that lot?
Well, I don't really have the answer to that, because it's not, I don't know. My general answer would be, I don't think it's happened yet. And I'm not sure it ever would happen. And so, you know, we can kind of do only so much right now. I don't think you can make anything foolproof if someone really wants to sue somebody or whatever. We've had legal throughout this while we've been making these decisions and proposals that have, you know, been okay and have not raised that issue. I mean, I suppose if somebody decided they wanted to build, I mean, it's the same argument, I suppose. Could you build a 5-story house in some other part of the city? Well, that's against the ordinance, but if you want to sue the city over it, I guess you could. You know, who knows how it would come out. I think, just my personal opinion, I think most people are probably cooperative with the way it goes, just a matter of having them see it in black and white and knowing which way they're supposed to go.
Chairman, may I say something?
Yeah, sure.
Part of what we were doing, and it may be getting a little bit lost in the conversation, is it's not that we're reaching out for power or to change things significantly from stopping or starting. It had to do with the residents that can sit on our boards, all the boards, the Board of Adjustment and the Historic and et cetera, and that a lot of us have been residents for longer periods of time than some of our city officials that seem to turn over in the building department and et cetera. This allows us, or we're trying to get to where they are speaking to us or getting input from people or residents that may have more time in the area, may have seen things that have transpired, and able to explain how this came to be or how this is being looked at. A lot of the things that you're going to hear about in 20 and 40 as we go through them is a lot of cleaning up of language. It's a lot of how things were perceived by one group perhaps when it was written, and actually there's a lot of history there too, how it was written, what its goal was, and then how it was administered the first time that it came up, and was able to see, you know, what happened, what transpired, what did the city officials see out of what was written down. And now we're trying to come through and kind of clean that language up and tighten it up so that we can be helpful in trying to guide people going forward. Not change what's going on necessarily, just be able to give input. The whole point of review is not to necessarily change what they're doing. It's being able to say, you know, these type of things aren't allowed in this area, you know, for whatever reason, or be able to say, you know, this came to be because this happened before, and this is what we're trying, the goal is in these new cleaned up ordinances. Thank you.
I have a question about, and I don't know if you're going to walk through the document sequentially or whatever, but one of the areas that I was interested in particular had to do with building height for a lot of different reasons, and especially thinking about all the flooding that's going on. I found it the inconsistent between the first set of division and the second one. And if you look at some of them, like if you go to section 40.8, building height, it's not really well defined. It's better defined in section 20.02, but between the two of them, I did not find it consistent. And even within 20.02, there seemed to be, if you did it one way, your house could be 2 feet higher than if you did it the other way. So you didn't even come to the same answer. So I had a lot of questions around how building height was being calculated or defined. In fact, if you go to letter G in 40.14, it says building height, but then it mostly talks about setbacks in relation to building height. So I don't want to jump around too much. I don't know if you're walking through the document or how this process works.
I'm sorry, could you tell me, what was the last 40 point?
The first place is 20.02.
Yeah, I've got that one.
Okay, and then it's mentioned again in 40.08.
Yes.
And then it's mentioned again in 40.14.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, 1.4.
And I just thought if they were more consistent, it would be easier. Because some of them I was looking for a definition or where you were measuring from.
Okay, well, I can kind of, first off, I wish I could tell you how they measure height, okay? That's what our staff does, and they do a good job, but it's always kind of like, isn't there a simple, answer, grade, how high is your property at that location, et cetera, et cetera. We've fought over that for a long time, whether it be if base flood elevation is supposed to apply to certain areas, what's not supposed to apply to certain areas. Some places in the code, they say they include the base flood elevation, some they don't. Right. So we've had many, many discussions about that. And of course, we're concerned down there because all the old homes are 1 or 2 stories because they didn't have to deal with FEMA. And so the reality is with FEMA, you have to add a story to everything. And so that's going to change the heights quite a bit. And of course, we're very conscientious of not getting too high down there because of the neighborhoods. Unfortunately, I won't say unfortunately, but FEMA exists. We're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have 3-story buildings, okay? Or can build 3-story buildings. You might just say, well, isn't 10 feet a floor, 10 feet per floor fine, 30 feet? Well, what about the base flood elevation? Well, we've got to add another 8 feet. Well, what about, where the ground is? Well, it all depends, and I think we've kind of come to the conclusion that it's about 40 feet at its as you look at it from the ground to the top.
It says a maximum of 35, and then there's...
Let me explain that, okay? And so that was for most of the homes. We were concerned that on 8th Avenue, which has, a very, almost all those, I can tell you, I've lived down there since '83, okay? There's been one thing built on 8th Avenue, all right, which is the Dewey Berkeley Beach Club. That's it. So you talk about over almost 45 years, there's been one thing built. So it's not like people are rushing to build things down there necessarily. All the rest of those buildings were probably built in the teens or in the 20s, or pretty close to it. So they're all very similar in height, and I think we all recognize what a unique gem 8th Avenue is that's really unlike almost anything else on the west coast of Florida, really. And so we're concerned, and frankly, when the Berkeley Beach Club was built, it certainly seemed so much higher than everything else around it, all right? But of course, we have FEMA. We had a whole discussion about why does the base flood elevation apply when you can't live on the first floor in a commercial building anyway. Well, that got us nowhere legally, I guess. So another way and if you looked at the former section 40, it had, I don't know what it said maybe 25 feet or 30 feet or something like
It was a
that.
maximum 38 feet. You're allowed to build to a maximum, I think it was
Well,
38 feet.
but it didn't mention whether it was base flood elevation or not. It just said maximum. And of course, I'm reading that as a layperson, I guess, and I say, well, whatever the number was, let's say it was 30 feet or 35 feet, that's taller than all the buildings that already exist there. So don't they mean from ground on up? Why should base flood elevation be applied when you can't live on the first floor anyway? So we spent a long time going through that and legal's involvement. And so the way we thought we'd deal with it is in section 40, put that language in that says, in 08, or that says
What page are you on?
40.8. It actually should be 40.08, I think.
107 and 111.
That says height shall not exceed 35 feet, which includes the base flood elevation. So we tried to eliminate that argument about does it apply, does it not apply, and we're just going from, as you look at it on the ground, up to 35 feet. Can you build 3 stories in 35 feet? Of course you can. But you're not building something 40 feet or 45 feet and then putting a rooftop elevator shaft on it and things of that nature. It makes it look like it's 50 feet. And, we felt that eliminated the concern that someone could then build another structure that's twice as tall as the historic structures there. And although it's confusing in a way, compared to the other definitions within section 40, we try to make it as clear as possible. But that's the reason. We even had a drone fly over that took the measurements of all the buildings in the CRDEA. And I will say, with the exception of the hurricane, which was really done after all pre this, and as an outlier, I think, as far as, the structures along there. And I don't think there was anything much higher than 30 feet, and that's I don't even think it was that high. That's the back end of the hotel there, which has 3 stories along the alley, but they're short. And so, I think we look forward when we have something built on 8th Avenue, we want it to fit in with the historic structures, and if they're twice as big, it's really a whole different mass and scale. And I don't think we think that 35 feet is onerous to anybody, because you can certainly build 3 stories, which is the most you can build anyway.
So what you just explained makes me feel like this is not accomplishing your intent.
All right?
Well, he did miss a little bit. So what we're doing is, when the original CRDEA was put together, it was listed as a maximum height of 35 feet. When the first structure was built on 8th Avenue in redevelopment, the city applied base flood elevation to the bottom of it and extended it the 10 feet or 11 feet for base flood elevation, making the structure 10 feet larger than anything else around it. So our goal was to come back and pull that overall height requirement back down to where the people that designed the CRDEA in the beginning, we can try and achieve that. So what we did is we said the max would be 35 feet, and the BFE has to come out of that 35 feet. So that most of the structures are 2-story structures that are on 8th Avenue at this point. The only one that's got the 3rd story is the Keystone. But it falls outside of this because it was done at a different time. But the whole point was trying to match all the buildings that run up and down 8th Avenue for the most part, where they only have 2 living levels. And then we had to add the base flood elevation so they could still get the 2 living levels above base flood elevation.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, so you're not talking about measuring from where the ground currently is. You're talking about a true 35 feet of altitude at the top.
That's what the goal is supposed to be, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, but if you look at 40.14, letter G, number 1, it talks about 35 feet in height measured from grade.
Well,
Again, BFE.
I think we have to, yes, I think grade, we're talking about the dirt.
Right, understand.
Okay, right, and so maybe that should be cleaned up and say, and make it match what it
I
says.
think that's my point. If you look at the sections where you talk about building height through this document, I found it very inconsistent, which added to the confusion. So I'm just saying maybe that needs to be cleaned up a little bit so that it's clearer.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, that's part of the purpose of us being here. So I think, yes, I think we have to be consistent throughout in what we said, but that was the reason why we chose that height and the reasons why, right? So I guess, Brandon, that makes sense. We can just clean that up to make it identical to the language in 40.8. Or unless you have, something you need to say about it.
Yeah, and I think I think we definitely can clean it up. That makes a lot of sense based on how you've just described it. I did want to say that item G is only going to apply in very limited cases. I think the intent is for any new commercial development, which of course is going to be at grade in 8th Avenue, to be limited to the 35 feet, like Member Hurley just explained. Item G would apply specifically when that ground floor is not flood-proofed, and 8th Avenue requires effectively commercial on the ground floor, so there would almost always be that ground floor flood-proofing. But this would be in the case where, for whatever reason, that the development does elevate that first floor to base flood elevation. If they were to get that additional 5 to 6 feet bonus from a base flood elevation, in that case, they would have to set back the portion of the building above 35 feet. But that could be explained better. I agree completely, so I'll work on that.
I think another place related to that is like when you get into the balconies, like if you look at 40.14, number 5, balconies 6 feet maximum may project into the front or side street setbacks. And that can be read, it's only a 6-foot balcony, or it can project 6 feet into the side street. And then in another place, it talks about a couple feet from the curb. So if you go down to G, number 2, again, some of the wording is just got to be cleaned up a little bit so that it's clear what you're exactly getting to.
Understood.
And along that line, I think, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, honestly, when we looked at some of this stuff was already in the previous, and it wasn't like something we said, didn't get that. I'm a nitpicker, I don't mean to say you are, but I probably didn't follow a lot of that. Yes, thank you. I think.
We did have a pretty heated discussion about the arcades, which is.
Right, but I think when we talk about the 6 feet maximum, we're not saying the balcony can only be 6 feet. We're just saying it can go 6 feet over, correct? I mean, that should be
Correct.
clarified, because,
But
yeah.
then there's another point where there's a curb and a couple of feet, and so I just was finding it not,
Where was the thing about the curb? What did you say that was at?
I think that pertains to the arcade sections.
Okay.
but there's a couple places, like if you go to 40.9 setbacks, it talks about marquees, canopies, but then there's a measure in there about open balconies. So again, I was just looking for that consistency and clarity.
I think, and Tara, Brandon, weren't we going to define arcade because we didn't have that defined?
Mm-hmm.
Which might
In my-
clarify some of that for you, Cindy?
Also an open balcony.
Yeah, there's some things we haven't defined in this, and it wasn't a heated discussion, we had a discussion.
We do, especially for arcades and balconies, like you brought up. We do have a few different sections, so I think
Correct.
just consolidating them all
Yeah,
in one
yeah.
section would clean it up. I agree.
And the last thing I have on this is really just a typo, but I think from and at on letter G, 40.14, letter G, measured from at grade. I just question if it should just be from grade, because you have two prepositions there. Typo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also had a point for consistency on 40.13, going back to the land, the lot splits it talks about, again, going from the Historic Preservation Board to the Board of Adjustments and then the City Commission, but when you talk about the same process under 2014, you omit the Board of Adjustments in that, it goes from the Historic Preservation Board to the City Commission. So I would assume it's the same process, whether it's under section 40 or under section 20.
I would assume, but Brandon may be able to answer that, because some of the, when they created Section 40, they really didn't mirror a lot of things out of section 20, and that's why we were trying to clean some of that up.
13, assembly of lot, splits, parcel, vacation of easements, and then it's the same title under 2014, lot splits, assemblies of parcels.
That should be added into 2014 as well, you're correct. And there are cases where subdivisions need to go to the Board of Adjustment, so I'll get that added in.
And then I had a question on the definitions. Is there a reason
In section 20 or in,
section 20 why the term accessory is not defined? Because it's used throughout the document. Is it defined earlier in the overall Code of Adjustments or I mean, the overall document, and that's why it was, I see there was an accessory structure envelope that was deleted, but the term accessory itself is used throughout, but I don't see it's defined. Is there a reason?
We do have a code-wide definition for accessory, so.
Hey, Brandon, I remember a discussion last year at the planning board about assembly of more than 2 lots. That is something for the future, is that correct? That we wanted to incorporate into?
That is in our overlay. We did include that. Let me see here. And this would only apply within the overlay. That might be something citywide that's looked at, but that is in. Let's see here. That is 20.07D. And it's related to assembly of parcels. Again, we talk about it as well in the 8th Avenue, but that's related more to the building massing. But 20.07 prevents multiple lots from being consolidated for one residence.
and I think just as an overview, we really, the key to words to me is compatibility and mass and scale. So, you know, if somebody wants to buy a couple lots next to each other, I understand that, but we're trying to keep it from looking like one big giant structure, you know, so you have breaks or changes and you know, things of those in that fashion. So I think, not that it's happened, but I think, you know, there's some concern, at least the citizens down there, and anybody should be in the historical district, is, you know, it developed that way over hundreds of years. There's just never really been, you know, with the exception of maybe, I'm going to call it, if y'all remember, the old Bush estate, but that was 3 houses. You know, that was 3 separate houses, and all owned by the same people. Now they're getting ready to build one structure there, but that was already joined together. And frankly, the design's not too bad. I mean, it doesn't look, it's not like one big giant structure, but of course, because Paso Girl is a prime kind of place to be, you're concerned about, you know, someone coming in and buying a whole block and doing something with it, you know, so.
This came up at the planning board last year, where the discussion resulted in the planning board having an opinion that no more than 2 lots should be able to be combined.
Right.
But that's for something we're working into the future development code. So I was just curious at how this aligned with that.
And I think our 80-foot linear maximum on a building kind of help with that too. There has to be a separation between buildings, and as such, a separation between lots and land masses.
Correct.
I have a technical question on 20.22 building design residential, where it talks about garage design elements. Do you know what the allowance is for garage door openings under this? Like what the height is for what's your allowance for garage door opening?
That is going to have to be a Brandon question.
I don't think we have a limitation other than the actual height of the floor. We do have floor height limitations. Tara, is that correct? The height of a garage door?
Hey, Brandon, I'm sorry, it's breaking up so bad. I just need to know the section so that I can pull it up.
I think we're speaking generally about the height of a garage door. Do we have any limitation other than the floor height limitation? I don't believe we proposed anything.
No, we did not.
And it's, I know it's a bizarre question, but I'm only asking this because of all of the golf carts. All of the lifted golf carts now are so tall, I just hate to limit people to what they can then put in their garage.
I think we have a general floor height limitation of 14 feet, which I think would cover, but that would be that would be the only limitation we have currently.
Unless they start making double-decker golf.
These things are huge. And then on 20.24, when it talks about the design review and required drawings, and it talks about the exhibits, and it says exhibits shall include colors, lighting fixtures, specifically. So, and I know it talks about the design book, which hasn't been together yet, but are you asking at this point homeowners to provide you specifically what their lighting fixtures on the outside of their homes are going to be in order to get approved for, or is it more of, I plan to have a carriage house look and a carriage house design, or I plan to have a coastal look and a coastal design? So otherwise you're asking them to then commit to purchasing in order to stop changes, et cetera.
Well, I would no. I mean, I would ask you to read 2025, which was some of the language of a design book. If you read that kind of last paragraph there, it says specific materials, colors, textures, and architectural style are not required. So I think, and this was something that I think Tara and the staff kind of put in, that when they prepare their plans, they're detailed. You know, it doesn't mean you say, oh, we don't like blue, make it red. It's not like that. It's just like you just kind of want to see what the whole thing is about. But without, obviously, the ability to, you know, tell people what they have to build. Is that right, Tara? We can finally see you. You were blank there for a long time.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, the intent is that right now, when staff reviews the submittals, a lot of them are in black and white, and then sometimes some of the design is not really consistent with what ends up getting built. So it's been a little bit of a challenge when you go back and you review some of the building submittals. You're challenged to even see the difference of mass and scale. And you know, recently we've been looking at a couple of the residential submittals, and because they were providing the texture and color, we were able to further help and assist on how they were either meeting or not meeting the intent of the code.
So to follow up on that, I did find areas where like materials was crossed out or color was crossed out, and then it was introduced later, and also a few typos. So you may want to again scan the document for those words, because if there's inconsistencies. And one of the questions that I had to do with section 20.02D, where it says that we have to review the number and types of rooms and the internal layout. And that surprised me on a historical building, because I always thought the exterior, of course, is extremely important. But what if somebody wants to just have one big open room and a bathroom in their house? I mean, I didn't understand what the intent was to get to the number and types of rooms and the internal layout.
Can you tell me the reference
It's
again on that? What section?
Section 20.02D, building design elements. It's in there.
Oh,
That-
2?
It didn't have,
Definitions.
it wasn't changed.
Okay.
Yeah, O2D, definitions.
That's not anything that we addressed.
You know, to jump in, I just think it's like all we can control is what the outside looks like, and we're not trying to control what the inside looks like. So if somebody wants one room with a bathroom in the middle, we may not want to go visit that place, but I guess they can build that as long as it fits the codes or whatever, you know, within the city. But
I do have a thought about reasoning behind that, though. If someone were to have an interior design that has one front door, and on the outside it looks like one house, and on the inside it's got two doors that go this way, and a living room and a dining room and a kitchen and a bathroom and a bedroom, that's now no longer a single family home, although it looks like one. On the inside, it's a duplex, and maybe it's not supposed to be a duplex. So I'm sure at some point, someone needs to take a look at those interiors and see what's the real intent of the design behind this house.
I did also want to say, and I don't know that we've ever seen one before this board, but there are very limited cases where we do look at the internal design of structures if they are going forward for any kind of ad valorem exemption and they're a structure that is open to the public, like a designation of a historic lobby or something like that. That would be something that the board would review, at least for those ad valorem taxing purposes.
So maybe.
Yeah, and what I would add is that this is just a definition, so you can rely on that as a building design element if you want to see it, but it's not a requirement to provide it. It defines what building elements are, and I believe that's just a general architectural definition. So that's what we relied on.
And that does roll over verbatim from the previous as well.
I know that, but I know you're trying to clean it up.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Somebody is earnestly trying to follow this. Are they going to have clear guidance? And if it's got a specific purpose associated with it, maybe that should be stated. Because I would read this and think that I have to give the architect and everything, all my plans, all this stuff, I mean, to be doing what I need to be doing to follow the process.
Well, there are times too when we're trying to strike a balance on the exterior with window placement and size and scale, and it helps to know what the room is behind that window, how it's being used, and why they may have made that choice for a window. And sometimes we can recommend maybe putting a shutter over it or around it to make it match in scale, but still give the privacy on that interior space that it needs.
So I still think that could be approached from the issue that's at hand, as opposed to a broad issue that doesn't really make sense. Just my thought is it seems to be a bit overreaching, and if there is a reason, like, the window, or perhaps concerned about a duplex, then those things should be addressed more specifically. Just my opinion.
And to save time for the builder or the homeowner, they would have to go back and make that revision and then come back before the board again. So, it's best for them to come forward with as much information as possible at the beginning to save time for that.
We can also say it may be required to be provided. Again, that's a definition, it's not a requirement. I understand that seems a little confusing, but really what the applicant and what they should be drawn to is section 20.24. And that's the requirements for design review and required drawings. Some of the issues that happen is sometimes you want to have a definition pretty substantive, because if you do run into an issue, that then the city can come back and say, well, that technically is part of the definition, even though it's not required in the design review. If, for instance, someone doesn't want to meet the mass and scale, if they don't have that information, then it's not part of the definition of the flexibility. So, I appreciate the comment. I'm just not sure that would be something I would remove from a definition, because it's not a requirement in the submittal. And we can be clear about that, I think it is, but it's always better to have your opinion as not looking at this.
Well, I do have another question on section 20.24, which you mentioned. And I was looking at the process, and again, I'm trying to put myself in the position of I'm the homeowner.
That's really good.
And basically, it says you get architectural approval, and then it gets reviewed by the historical. Now, if the architect approves it, thinking that everything meets the design book and all that, and then you all get the approval, and you go, oh no, this is terrible. They missed the fact that the house is 50 feet tall. I don't know. It doesn't talk about what happens after that, and I just thought if we looked at it from a process flow, would it be better before they got approval to have the architect say, here, I've looked at it, or, how would that process actually work, the number of steps that a resident would go through to complete this process. And it kind of just says, you review it and it stops there, and it's after they already got approved, which would, in my impression, put you in a negative context.
Yeah, I would point out that one of the things we talked about in subsection 4, because I was concerned that it says, you know, and provide a summary of approval or recommended changes, as if there's the belief that it can't be rejected. So I suggested adding, you know, rejection in there, and that was kind of, I was kind of talked down from that, I thought.
Well, I mean, it's, just so I can be clear,
Yeah.
the reason for that was the board is a recommending board. So they can recommend changes, but they cannot recommend a denial. So that's the reason why that was there, because it's really only the elected officials that are the decision makers. But I hear what you're saying. So, I mean, there would be, I mean, I don't think that there's anything in this process that would prohibit an applicant to come and ask the Historic Preservation Board what the requirements are. Typically, with developers and architects, when they're submitting their application, they would rather have a first level staff review, because staff's review is really to meet the code. And then the Historic Preservation Board really should be that too, but the Historic Preservation Board in theory brings a little bit more context to the area. So when the staff report is done, it should be outlined all the measures that were met. And then the Historic Preservation Board would really have to have substantive reason to contradict what the staff report said. And I mean, that could be an option. I just don't know many applicants that would want to go to a board first before having any look or any approvals with the staff.
I'd also point out that oftentimes when the staff makes a recommendation, they do have some conditions, okay, that are a little more of a gray area where they want this or would like this, and then we kind of get to hash that out a little bit. And historically, I think that's probably the wrong word. Usually it turns out that the builders are very receptive to that, you know, because I think most people do want to get along as far as that goes. So that kind of allows a dialogue that to occur the way it's set up now. And I think, you know, what Tara said makes sense under those circumstances. Because, you know, yeah, that's why one of those earlier questions about not having Keith. I mean, we don't particularly, you know what I'm saying? So we can't really say no, 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 no. But we can certainly prod and push people in the right direction. And if we're working with the city and have, you know, their support of what goes on, I think we'll get a better result than we've been getting sometimes.
So their approval condition would be that you do get to review it so that they don't look at you and say, but I've already been approved.
Correct. Yeah, I think that that's fair. I can't think of a situation where, you know, it's gotten down to where we say we think, you know, we would like this little change, and they go, no, we're not going to do that. You know, it's just they're happy to get along when it's usually something fairly minor. If it's something bigger, I think the staff has already corrected that to start with, even before it gets to us. Is that fair?
I think that a lot of the staff reports have identified, just like Chair just said, that they've identified where, you know, the policies are not specific enough, but it gives enough room that sometimes an applicant will push back on, and then it's deferred to it's not really deferred, but that's a condition of the approval, is to actually go through the Historic Preservation Board and to have a discussion on it. So typically how it's been working is if there is any pushback, that's where the pushback starts to have the conversation, is with the Historic Preservation Board.
I mean, I would say sometimes we have situations because it's already on the calendar and will come before us, and the architect will have already made a change between when the staff reviewed and we got it, you know. So it does tend to work itself out. Does anybody have, if you've noticed, if you actually sat and compared to the stuff before, or if we're talking about Division 20 now, first, let me just ask, in Division 40, do you have any more questions about that? That's, we added some purpose and intent language that mirrors Division 20. And as I said, 20 years before they built the CRD, it was part of the overlay. And I think when they created the special zone for the CRD, there was probably an assumption that the historical aspects would still apply, but it just got neglected. So we've added those things. And other than the height that we talked about, it's pretty much the way it was before. And again, this is, we're open to ideas when we meet with the commission, and too, maybe people will say we haven't gone far enough, or we need to do, and that's for a later day. But right now, what we're just trying to do is, I said, tighten up kind of what we had and make it reflect what, what the people, I think, want anyway.
Simple question, there's a reference under 2012, and it might be elsewhere too, of locally designated historic structures. Who locally designates historic structures, and how often is that done?
So the board does. The applicant has to make that request. We can't go out and say, we want you to designate your house or your structure. So the applicant comes forward and says, we want our home to have local historic designation. It meets these criteria, and we either approve or disapprove it.
And so, and I think that all this historic designation from homes is entirely a voluntary thing,
Right.
and they can change their minds later and do things like that, so,
And again, they're usually identified in the survey that we do.
Yeah.
We do a historic survey of homes that are over 50 years old, and we've done it, we're on our third one now. We just completed our second one.
What's that?
The last survey that we just did, we just added in Dunces Our Place and Bella Vista, I guess,
Yeah, but there's new.
for review.
Right, in the future, I know they're going to be looking at Don Cesar Place and Bella Vista, because,
It identifies.
we're all, except for you perhaps, I think we're all historic in here, so,
Identifies all the structures, and then it identifies them by age and their different architectural design, which allows a map of it, for lack of a better term, and then those individuals can then apply for their designation individually, and it's up to them.
Can we talk about section 20.10? I just wanted to ask about the replacement of a fixed number for the front yard setback with a very ambiguous average historic setback. It seemed like it would be open for a lot of interpretation, or why use average when a extreme outlier could draw the average in one direction heavily versus something like mode, where it's the most frequent historic setback rounded to a whole number, something like that.
Well, I'm going to defer to Brandon on that, because when I see words like Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, I tend to shrink away from that and just rely on the experts on that kind of stuff, so.
So would the concern be if you have a block face with two 20-foot setbacks and then a 0, it would just be an extreme variation? That's a good point. I don't know that I guess it would help to actually take a look to see what that type of variation is. I think that when we look for design reviews, because that's one of the elements that we look at in design reviews currently, we tend to not see a whole lot of variation. Homes tend to be, for example, Sunset Way, we tend to have a lot of homes that are set very close to the property line. Other places like Gulf Way, they tend to be fairly consistent. That's something staff can probably look at to see if there is any kind of extreme variation, and then possibly you were thinking that the most frequent setback would be the basis for that, or?
That was my idea, yeah.
Okay.
'Cause that is looking at what's there currently, and now you've got a fixed number to work from versus
Right.
someone arguing with you, well, 50 years ago, this other house used to be here, and that's historic, but it's not there anymore.
And a lot of this is going to be dictated by the lot sizes, and lot sizes in the pasture growth overlay, which is what we're discussing, are very similar across the board, at approximately 50 by 100. Now, they do vary, but not by much more than, go ahead.
What I would, so the reason there's an average and away and measure. You'll have to get permission from each homeowner that you go onto their property to measure from the right of way from their property line to their home. You wouldn't have a definitive number, and what we've typically seen in historic neighborhoods is an average seems to work better because street by street it can change. But if you want to do, you would have to, if you want to do the measurements, you do have to get permission by the property owner to do that.
I guess.
So that's why a lot of people just stick with an average.
Well, that would make me more concerned then, because it would also be similarly impossible for the city to enforce. You would have to get permission to measure what's there to demonstrate something was not in compliance.
And Chair, I think the reason.
That's why it's considered an average.
I think the reason, because I remember the board discussing this maybe 6 months ago, and I think the concern was more about having significant variation from other structures. So to have a 10-foot setback when there might have been an average of 15 or 20. So potentially a way to resolve this would be to keep the 10, but also keep in the average. So you want to have a home that would be set at a 7-foot front setback when 2 homes are at 20. It does kind of bound those a little bit more. Would something like that potentially work? And I'll look into your example as well.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
I
can
think
talk about
that
more.
was, goes back a little bit why we wanted to get rid of the choices in how you build your house. Either it's a underlying zone or overlay, because you're getting some distinct differences. But by the same token, you may have a really, really old house that was built on the very back of a lot line that could never be built today. And so it may have a 60-foot front yard. Well, you can't expect the neighbor to have that. I mean, there's going to be some collateral damage as life goes on. But
I can remember a specific circumstance where we had to apply this. Is it okay if I share that? So the schoolhouse, when they renovated the schoolhouse,
let's not call it. It was the schoolhouse for a year, maybe. It's on 4th Street. It was one little spot that presumably was a schoolhouse for a year, not one that was, if you know the history. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so a little house on 4th Avenue that had been there for a long time, and they were renovating it, and they wanted to add some square footage to the back on the ground level. It was inside the backyard setbacks. I mean, it was outside the backyards. They couldn't build a new structure there that far, but the structure did exist back that far, and they wanted to make a lateral addition off the back. And that wasn't going to interfere with anyone's line of sight or passage between properties for emergency vehicles or access or utilities. So that was an easy approval
I
thing
think it was.
to do. But that would be a circumstance where we would relax those setbacks for something that already existed. It's a contributing structure, but the new part was also going to be non-conforming. So we had to approve that non-conforming.
Right, because I think it was maybe a 40 by 40 lot. It was
Really tiny.
really tiny. And I mean, I don't think there's any other like that on Pasadena, but that's the way it was developed in the last 100 years. So you don't want to be in a situation where it's like, well, you need to tear your house down and build something new because we're not going to let you add a small room to it and keep it historic. And it kind of defeats the whole purpose. So, we have the ability to, I guess, approve some things of that nature for good reasons.
I have a question. If an existing accessory building was destroyed, like in a storm, can they replace that, or they have to go with the new rule like that they can't have that kind of a building in the front? Or what happens when something gets wiped out?
So you're talking about if they had like a detached, not a detached garage, a shed or something like that. So not a living ability.
That's actually a good question, because the Pasadena overlay was developed to avoid spot zoning. So it would protect all the homes in the overlay in the event of a catastrophic event that wiped out things or you lost items of your property. You'd have the ability to put them back. Now, to some degree, there is having to build to the new building requirements. But I believe we're going to allow you to get your accessory building back, such as a detached garage or something like that. If it was destroyed, that they would allow you to rebuild it. That was part of the protection of the Pasadena overlay when it was first developed.
Right, and that specifically extends to historic structures. It does allow for, and that's one of the benefits of being on the local registry is that, or voluntarily on the registry, is that they are able to rebuild, substantially improve a structure, even if it's non-conforming. So.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of, and I think a lot of the public doesn't know this, on some of these old homes, they just think they need to tear them down to build something new. And they don't. I mean, because you can do additions. I mean, if you go the right way, there's a number of houses on Pass Road that are old structures that they've done significant additions to, and they look great. You know, the problem is that many of them are in such disrepair, it's hard to do that.
So basically, they're grandfathered.
Yeah, that'd basically be it, yeah. It created a way to protect the existing structures, the existing multifamilies and et cetera that wouldn't have fit, at the time, the regular underlying zoning. Now, that's why we're trying to strengthen the overlay, so it'll protect the existing homes and also try to protect redevelopment as it goes forward to try and keep the place similar.
I have another question. There was a place, page 43, where it was eliminating the references to the common yard, but then they were referenced again in 20.20C1, page 91. So again, I just don't know if I didn't understand it correctly, or if that's just something, I guess, to check and see if it's consistent. You know what I mean?
I spoke with our consultant about this earlier. That was a mistake, and it's something we need to fix up. For single-family homes in Paso Roble, there are 3 current frontage types that can be used: a porch, a stoop, or landscaping, which is called the common yard. We had intended to remove that so that the landscaping standards are still in place, but someone can't just put trees in where they would need to normally have a structural setback to the building. That is intended to be removed. It was just it was a leftover, so we're going to be deleting that.
Thank you. And I also had some questions about one of everybody's favorite subject was parking, because I was reading about, how you could take the 15 feet, and then I didn't know how metered parking and all that. There was a lot in this thing about parking. So I just wanted to make sure that I understood that, so I was going to ask you to kind of...
You're bringing back so many happy memories.
So what section are you talking about? 2018 minimum off-street parking requirements?
20.18 and B, yes.
Mm-hmm. So that would apply to only the very limited number of commercial structures that we have in the overlay outside of the community, outside of the CRD-EA, and they would be able to count any on-street parking toward their minimum requirements. So it would just be a radius measurement. They would show that to us, and if they have on-street parking within 500 feet, whether it's metered or not, they would be able to do that.
So my concern was, knowing that it's very tight parking, would that have a negative impact on the residents? Because a commercial entity is, I guess, being allowed to count potential resident parking places as part of their parking lot. So I just wanted to make sure I understood that, because it's a tough parking situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, and maybe Brandon and I disagree on the same. I hope it's not saying they can count, okay, on the side streets, okay, on the avenues, that's not metered parking. So the public can't park on those unless they have unless they live there and have a sticker. So I assume they're talking about counting the spots that are on Gulfway or Pasquarel Way, which are the metered spots, or on 9th or 10th. There's a couple areas, 9th particularly, right near the 8th Avenue, which has a lot of public parking. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate?
Tara, I think just defining that to include customer or employee available parking, do you have any concerns with that? Just to metered and...
No, I don't have any concerns if it's clarified. To remove that would be a concern, just to remove that allowance, because it's been an entitlement that's been in place. So if we don't allow it any longer, it's just, I don't know if any commercial properties have ever used it. If they haven't, then you can make the change. If anybody is using this, then we have to think about how you permitted it and now you're removing it. But that's just I defer to the attorney on that. Typically, no one wants to remove vested rights.
Well, I would also say too that the reality is the city does get involved in these parking situations when there's a particular issue, or they can. For example, the businesses on 8th Avenue, you know, a problem can be people are parking there and going to the beach. Well, that's an enforcement issue, okay? And so that's a city situation. I know that on 9th Avenue, which is metered parking, they've made a portion of those that to park there, you have to be going to the business on 8th Avenue. They're not for beach parking again. Now, I know some of the people have to post their own guard out there to make sure people aren't going to the beach or not, but, you know, I think the city can be receptive to fixing that problem so the businesses do have, well, as sufficient parking as they can have. Everyone knows on the weekend it's 100% full no matter where you are. And I do know that they were doing things where there were some spaces up by Hurley Park where there was like employee parking, a limited amount for, you know, because they couldn't park anywhere near where they worked. So that's something that I think works hand in hand with the city parking enforcement and how they can make changes to facilitate that everybody gets to do what they want to do. So that's more of the reality of it. Right?
There is a little bit more. In newer construction, the city did have requirements in commercial development prior to CRDEA and et cetera, that as you increased your commercial business, if you redeveloped a commercial business, you had to provide spaces for it. Now, again, we talk about buildings in 8th Avenue that have been there historically, and then we talk about ones that are relatively new. The only time I know that the case came up was when the Hurricane was expanded. It did not have parking spaces when it first was expanded, and then later had to create its own parking lot. That's, I think, what the essence of this was, is that buildings that depended upon parking, public parking, because they were already there, had to be protected. And at the same time, new development had to have its own requirements to come up with how it was going to provide parking for its customers and not necessarily take away from what was existing.
And, you know, the thing that's always funny to remember is when most of those buildings were built on 8th Avenue, there was no cars on the beach. They didn't get a bridge till 1919. So that was a problem they didn't have to even worry about. Maybe horse parking or something, but, you know. So,
And I do think within that 500-foot bubble that has to be defined, if on-street parking is available, I would say if it's resident permit parking, that wouldn't be considered as available for commercial use. So that would be protected anyway.
I think we could definitely better define that, though. I did want to say we do need to wrap up in just 2 minutes for the regular meeting, but I appreciate all the feedback from the planning board. I'll include this as a discussion item at one of the upcoming meetings with these changes once we've wrapped up our process. And if you have anything else, please reach out to me.
Thanks, Brandon.
Anything else from the board?
thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you. Yes, from the planning board.
Nice to meet you folks. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gavel.
Are we adjourned?
Gavel.
Oh, sorry. Now 2:30, if we can all rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
We got a new microphone here. Member Hurley?
Here.
Member Young?
Yes.
Member Hawkinsmith?
Yes.
Member Daschle?
Here.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Okay, first on the meeting, we have the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any items that they would like to add for discussion? And if so, what would they be? Okay, the only thing I guess I would add, just because I want to be able to clarify for everybody at the end of this meeting, is just what our next steps are as far as workshops and things of that nature. We may already have that as a discussion item, so just based on what we talked about today and things of that nature. So I'd ask that we just get a immediate update essentially on what our next steps are as far as doing workshops and getting this to the commissioners.
Well, I'm going to move that we approve the agenda of the September 5th, 2024 meeting to include a discussion about next steps for our workshops.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, roll call.
Member Young?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith?
Approved.
Member Daschle?
Yes.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, this now is the point for audience comments. I would point out that if you have some comments about something that we're going to be talking about later that's on the agenda or discussion items, you can wait until that point and you will be heard. But if there's something that you want to make a general comments, now's the time to do that. Does anybody wish to step forward with general comments?
I do have one comment card.
Okay.
This is for general comment, not related to anything on the agenda. This is general comment, not on agenda items at this time.
That's okay. We'll be
well,
happy. We can hear you twice if
I
we
have a
to.
card from somebody else.
Yeah, they're
Thank you.
supposed to get their comment cards.
Oh, I see, right. Pete, please state your name for the record, please.
It's Patricia Lopez. We own the home at 1005 Gulfway, and there's new construction going in right next door to ours. Our house was built in 1908. It's the Bell Bungalow. It's actually featured in the walking tour of Paso Grove, which I'm kind of proud of. I was never notified. I received no notice in the mail. When the new construction was beginning, I noticed, and my neighbor called me, that there were 34 huge pilings delivered into the yard. And I said, oh my gosh, how are those pilings going to be put in? Because I know that they're building with the overlay. So it was going to be extremely close to my house. And come to find out, they're going to be pounded in. And I immediately ran to the city, to the commission, to the building department, and I said, I am so concerned. And I called the contractor. I said, I'm so concerned about the trauma, about the vibrations in the ground, and how this might affect my house, because it's solid poured concrete, which doesn't give a lot. It was built by Mr. Bell from Chicago. I'm not here because this is already done, and my house got damaged from it. I'm here for the next person, because it's very important to preserve, I think, Paso Grill, the historic quality, the charm, and everything. After coming to the city and telling them my concerns, which, they took with a grain of salt, I must say, I immediately went home and called an engineer to come out and look at my house and take pictures and do a pre-construction survey of my house to show that it was in fairly good condition for the age, and I'm glad I did. Once the pounding commenced, the house shook with every pound, and it was very frightening. And when we had a pipe burst, I immediately called my daughter was at the house, and she called me in Tampa and told me about it. She called the water department. I got 3 minutes. Oh my goodness. The plumber came out. I called the owner of the pounding company, and I credit him very much, was a stand-up guy and came right out to the property, and he was concerned about it. He took care of the bill for the plumber, and he's been extremely kind and receptive, and he's going to have a structural company come out to our house and take a look at it. And he's getting in touch with me to set up an appointment. However, I don't feel I should be going through this to begin with. I should have been given notice, and we have a home also in Hyde Park in Tampa, and the Architectural Review Committee there does have teeth, big teeth, and which is nice. They do preliminary testing or report with engineers to see if the property next to any new construction might be affected. And there are different ways to do pilings. They can be drilled. There's mats that can, stop the vibrations. My 3 minutes is up. But anyway, number one, the property owners need to be notified. The surrounding properties, the history museum is right behind it. And number two, there's other means to put in these pilings. And I hope to God that the next people get that choice. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I will just say for the record, we spoke on the phone a while ago about that.
We did.
And I shared with you some of my frustrations. I will point out that last month I did bring it up about augured versus pounding, and we thought that'd be something we would address because I think we all recognize that to be a significant issue. And I think we've been fortunate that a lot of places built recently have done the augured type or the screw-in type and not the pounding. Yeah. And so I certainly thank you for bringing that up, and I think it's something we will talk about. Brandon, you don't have anything to say on that, do you? No, because we did, okay, I don't know if you're up for that. And so that's something, and as far as your notification, things of that nature, that's not really within our purview, but I think as far as, because we're just an advisory board to the city, but I think that is something, I will commit to you that is something we will follow up on and trying to think if we can make it a citywide requirement, or at least in the historic area, or make that a consideration for anyone that has to build a new home, especially next to an older structure where it's so close.
Maybe another checkbox on the application for construction.
Right.
Notification of neighbors.
Okay. Ma'am, please state your name.
Eileen Gunther, 111 10th Avenue. I just wanted to follow up on Pat's comments. I am, directly behind Kate Curry's old property where they were doing this. And what was between us is, of course, the church, which was just on the other side of the alley. And, the museum, those bricks are from 1915. All those pipes in those alleys are so old. It's really invasive. My house was directly, like one property away and one alley away, and you felt and there were over 6,000 strikes. That's a lot of pounding, and it took, 4 days or whatever. And that was a small property. That was only 34, I think they put in 30 to 34 pilings. But all of the lots in Pass the Grill, when people decide to do this, if they choose that pile foundation process, some of them don't even have alleys. Like Chris Marone doesn't have an alley behind his house. He's just a fence between him and the
Right.
property behind him or whatever. So I guess what I'm saying is I just want to reiterate, I don't know what is the way that we can get someone to put a restriction, at least in Passagrill, on if you do want to have that type of a foundation to secure your building, which I understand, okay, that's fine. There's got to be, you've got to use the 4 times more expensive process of drilling. I know it's more expensive, but if you want to do that, it shouldn't be at my expense. It shouldn't be at her expense to have cracked buildings and plumbing problems and all the stress and so on. So what is the process? I mean, who do we go to? Do we present this to the city commission? Do we start with the building department and say, how do we get this? I mean, what do we do? That's what I'm asking, is basically, you know, how do we rectify this? Because it's going to happen continuously, and
Yeah, my advice would be, and as I said, we're for advisory, obviously that would be
Right.
a change that the commission would ultimately have to adopt themselves. They're the ones with real.
it could not be included in these amendments that you're
It might be able to. I mean, I think, and please bear with me for a moment, it's taken us 2 years to get where we are
Oh, yeah,
right
I
now.
know.
Okay, and so, you know, it doesn't mean that things can't change as time goes on, but I think that would be more of the building department and the commission would have to change that, not something in the historic. It's a good first step, is what I'm saying, but I encourage you to talk to the building department. I encourage you to send emails to the city manager. I encourage you to send emails to the commissioner, because those are the people that are ultimately going to make that decision, okay? We are totally in support. I think, I'm not putting words in other people's mouths, but I think we're supportive of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, one of the reasons it was just brought up last month.
There is a less invasive way, and the other thing about the notification, everything that contractor did was within code. He didn't do anything wrong.
Right,
He
right.
looked and he read, and he was allowed to do that, and he didn't need to notify anybody, and that's the problem where that has to change. Because what if those folks were in Hyde Park and they didn't even know this was happening? You know, or whatever. They wouldn't have had a structural engineer go out there ahead of time.
Oh, I know, and I'm.
So,
yeah.
you know, it needs to be, it's got to be the same notification as if you're going to the Board of Adjustment for a variance. If you're going to if you're going to pile drive pilings into the ground, somebody in your immediate area, everybody needs to be notified of that happening, so that you're there and you can maybe take some action or whatever. So I don't know, we kind of feel like it's an important issue, and how do we start?
Well,
Where do we go?
I think we all agree, and it's something that, especially in the historic district, it
Oh,
needs
yeah.
to
There's
be
no,
rectified.
these houses aren't even on foundations.
I mean, you know, when they.
I don't even have a foundation under my house. It's just gonna be,
Yeah.
you know, kind of
You
moving
can just
along.
float out to sea with the same way they
Yeah.
brought it in, right? No, yeah, no, when they redid all the pipes on Passagirl Way, there was significant piping, you know, pounding, and a lot, even new structures got some damage to some extent. So it's very, very important, and I think that's something that should be brought up. You certainly will have our support, but I would suggest you need to.
Did you all know
Last-
when you approved Kate Curry's the new building that went
Right.
up there? Is it on there that there's gonna be, that's how the foundation is gonna go in?
Be honest with you, I don't remember, because frankly, that wasn't so much of a concern of us at that time. You know, we're going from the standpoint of the design, and this is what the city has said. So
Okay.
I would kind of defer. I assume that probably is in those plans. Do they talk about pilings, if they're gonna do that?
I was gonna say, I believe that a pile foundation is required in all construction now.
Yeah, I'm sure it's part of their plans, but that's not something we have control over it the way it is right now.
I can't say for that specific case, but typically at the point that it's presented to you, you're looking at more of the design or the architecture. It's not, they're not building plans at that point typically, so.
Is
Okay.
there a place within our code or with our revisions that construction processes would fit?
We have an amendments to the building code section, and that's typically where those type of winnowing or narrowing of the building code would be in that section. That's in our code of ordinances, so typically something like that would be in there.
Not in section 20.
Section 20 being more land development regulations, typically no.
Right.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Brandon.
I do have one more comment card.
Hello, Brandon Tecklenburg, owner of 3112 Pasadena Way. I wanted to take the moment to thank the board here, a couple members of City Hall staff for helping me along the way and approving my sign at 3112. I wanted to step up here and thank you. A lot of times people don't give thanks. Also want to take the time to thank Jennifer McMahon, working with our Little League to get the concession stand going finally. So that's great. I love it. One question I had, I'm also an owner of 102 8th Avenue and 702 Pasadena Way. And I've been watching the meetings, the workshop today, and I went back in time up to about May of 2024, watching the meetings on Code Division 20, Code Division 40. I was just wanted to talk quickly to the board and find out, because I'm not following it completely, is the board recommending or working on proposing to the city to lower the height restriction on 8th Avenue, which would also affect 702 Pasadena Way? I have a good friend of mine who's a partner with me on 102 8th Avenue, and at 702 Pasadena Way, I have two other partners that are good friends of mine. So they've asked me to come and speak to you today to see what it is that your board is wanting to change or propose to the city. Thank you. You want to address it?
Yeah, I guess to address that, I would say we went from a more of a nebulous area of what the height meant on 8th Avenue, okay, from long ago to being more specific about it. So I don't know how that would exactly fit into what you might want to do or have planned to do. There's been some other changes as far as what you can do on rooftops and things of that nature that had nothing to do with us, but I think was changed since, as I said, I don't know if you heard earlier, there's really only been one thing that's been built on 8th Avenue in the last 40 years.
Correct.
And so we're trying to make it clear that that you can build a structure 35 feet high.
Okay.
Okay, and that means from standing on the ground and looking up 35 feet. All right, so whether that's a little bit lower than it was interpreted when they did the Berkeley Beach Club, I'm not 100% sure on that. But also the Berkeley Beach Club had a lot of stuff on the roof that would be maybe not, would have to go through a different process now.
Okay.
So I'd encourage you to come to whatever conclusion you might on that, and certainly when it comes in front of the commission, to speak your mind on as far as that goes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And you can, we've talked before.
Sure, yeah.
If you, you can call me and I could tell you a little bit more, but it's
Sure.
basically that's the situation. Unless you have specific plans, I can't tell you.
No, I don't have any. Yeah, you can see what I did at La Tortuga. You know, I'm trying to keep, historic and make it modern and beautiful.
No, I get it. And
The concern that we have is that there'll be restrictions put on what we just purchased, because everything's been purchased in the last 2 years. So they're concerned that what we purchased, what was advertised and marketed, is now going to change or possibly could change.
Well, you'll have to look at that stuff close, because I don't know exactly what your plans were or could be. It's nothing major from the standpoint, you can still build a 3-story structure and all that kind of stuff. So, beyond that, I would just recommend you read the stuff and get familiar with it.
Will do.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you for the thank you.
Yes, and thank you for the Little League stuff too. I'm glad to hear that's progressing. Jennifer, I'll talk to you maybe later about that. I want to get an update. Thank you. Okay, so next we have on action item. Oh no, we have to now approval of the minutes. Has any of the members had an opportunity to review the minutes? And does anybody have a motion?
I reviewed the minutes and I would move to approve the minutes from August 1st, 2024.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith?
Approve.
Member Daschle?
Approve.
Member Hurley?
Approve.
Member Young? Approved. Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now we're on to section 4 action items. 4A is the local historic designation number 24055, which deals with the property at 2507 Pass Girl Way.
And I just note before we move on with that, that on the agenda, it says 23055. But when you open up that link, it says 24055 on the paperwork. So it's just the link on the website that's mismarked. Okay. Unless there's something else.
So
Thank you.
did I give the right number or
You
not?
did.
Okay.
You did. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so staff has a presentation for us. And before we get started, this is like the first time we've had a nice little packet like this. Is this something we can kind of expect in the future? So we don't have to print out 169 pages at home if we want to do that.
For today, because the monitors are down, that's why.
Oh, okay.
In front of you.
Yes, gotcha, thank you.
Right, because while the public can see this, you can't.
Okay, gotcha. Very good, thank you.
We wanted to make sure that you could see them.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this property, this is for local historic designation for property located at 2507 Paso Grill Way. It's a single-family residential property, and this is case number 24055. The applicants are Sherry and Ron Cicino, and they have lived in this house since the mid-1970s. And they are requesting a certificate of appropriateness as a companion document as well. But first, they're seeking local historic designation for their house. So on our exhibits, we've got the land use and zoning maps, the aerial photographs of 2507 Paso Grill Way, both current pictures and pictures that I scoured up from some of the old Florida Master Site File forms that were done back in the 1980s. Also staff findings and a recommendation. The zoning is RU2, which is residential urban 2, and it is in the Paso Grill Overlay District. This is an aerial photograph of the property. And under background and analysis, this is a craftsman style single-family residential that was constructed, as I said earlier, in 1934. And it's a contributing historic resource within the Paso Grill National Register Historic District. Visual field review shows that this house to be well-maintained, and a certificate of appropriateness is also being sought to add a carport on the south side of the property, and it is in the house right now seems to be in very good condition. The COA request is also being presented for review before this board following this request for local designation. The house is seems to be in very original condition. I know that some things have been changed out, but when you compare the photographs between the two of them that you'll see on the next page when you turn to the page of photographs, the house is currently painted kind of a blue-green, and some of the older photographs show that it is of the same material, but a different color. It has a lighter green color, more like a sage green, I would say, for the photographs. The photographs were taken by, they were part of the early survey, about 1987 or 85, I think. So under staff findings, staff is supporting this request to locally designate 2507 Paso Grill Way as a local historic landmark. According to this property's Florida Master Site File, the building exemplifies or reflects the broad cultural, political, economic, or social history of the city and county, the state or the United States, and it is a contributing property within the National Register Historic District of Paso Grill. It also has continued its use as a single-family residential structure with an excellent level of architectural integrity. As such, staff finds that 2507 Paso Grill Way is representative of Paso Grill's historic district significance. For a recommended motion, I recommend that you utilize, I move to approve the request for local landmark designation, and as it goes further within your paper, I won't read it to you. And if you've got any questions, I will be glad to answer them while I scroll these photos through. Some of I know you can't see them, but to the public watching, the photos that are black and white come from 1987. So you can see that the house looks substantially the same. And the Cecinos, I think, they expressed to me that they were very much interested in keeping the integrity of the house. The carport, as it's going to be built, and as we'll discuss in the certificate of appropriateness, would be something that would not detract from the house itself, but also it's going to be something that could be removed, and then the original house would still be there intact. So it would not be hurting it. And I know in the past we've talked about this with additions that do or don't impact the architectural integrity of the house, and in this case, such a structure to the south would not impact the structural integrity of the house. Thank you. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Does anyone have any questions? And I know, I don't know if the Casinos are here, or they could speak, but I don't know I know that might be more appropriate.
Areas here.
In the next part when we talk about it, because, you know, I don't think there's any discussion, because this is the perfect thing that we like to do. So, you know, it's a great house. They've taken care of it. So, unless anybody else wants to jump in, I'll move to approve the request for local landmark designation for 2507 Paso Grill Way, which is a contributing residential structure within the Paso Grill National Register Historic District, which is case number, hopefully, 24055.
I'll second that motion.
Ms. Shapiro, Cecino is here, and she would like to speak.
Do you want to speak now?
Or a certificate.
I'll speak if necessary and requested.
No, I think there might be yes. I think that would be the more appropriate time. I think you're good right now. Yes. Okay, so Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Member Daschle?
Yes.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Member Young?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith?
Yes.
Member Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so next we have, along with the same piece of property, we have the certificate of appropriateness for which is number 24053 at 2507 Paso Grill Way. Okay,
Well,
staff, you have a report on this as well.
yes, you have a report on this. So, again, the same property, 2507 Paso Grill Way, and the applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness to add a carport with a balcony onto the south side of this single-family residential craftsman-style home that was built in 1934 and which is a contributing structure to the Paso Grill National Register Historic District. An overview of the proposed work is the exterior siding will remain as is. The proposed carport and balcony will be added using cypress wood and concrete. The PGT hurricane compliant windows will replace the existing windows, but I understand that they will continue to have the same look. They will just be storm resistant. Doors will remain as they are now. The metal roof will remain. The entrances and porches will remain the same as well.
Can I interrupt you for a second? You said something about windows, right?
Yes.
Where are windows being put in if it's an open car?
They are going to be replacing the existing windows, which are not hurricane resistant.
In the rest of the house?
Yes.
Okay, fine, I just missed
I
that
believe
part.
it's the rest of the house. I believe
That's
it's-
fine, I just was struggling with the carport and that part. I get it now. All right, thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. So we're in looking at the Secretary of Interior standards, as you know, new additions, exterior alterations and such do need to come before you for review. And also, in this case, any surface cleaning of the structures is, shall be undertaken using the gentlest means possible. And if any significant archaeological resources are affected or discovered during any such construction, then they need to be protected and preserved. We need to be told about that. And if such resources must be disturbed, mitigation measures shall be undertaken at that time. In addition, taking a look at the Secretary of Interior standards, the property shall be used for its historic purpose or placed in a new use that requires a minimal change. In this case, it's remaining a single-family structure. The historic character of the property shall be retained and preserved, and it is my opinion that it is, because the house is not going to be changed. Yes, there will be some new windows, but they're going to emulate the existing windows. They're just going to be something that will hopefully not be blown out in a storm. And each property shall be recognized as a physical record of its time, place, and use. And in fact, this house continues to look as it did when it was constructed back in the 1930s. And except for the side carport, which is going to still continue to be compatible with the existing structure, it's going to continue to look like a property that may have been there in the 1930s and 40s until the present time. If you've got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Staff is recommending that this be approved as proposed at 2507 Paso Grill Way, and this historic certificate of appropriateness is case number 24021. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay. Yeah, tell me what the case number is again, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. The case number, I'm sorry. My apologies. It is 24053.
Okay. All right, sorry, Holly, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. So if I'm understanding that the carport and the deck on top will have the existing windows on the second floor that are being replaced with hurricane windows, but the deck is ornamental. It's not a patio. It's just the roof of the carport.
It's the roof of the carport, but it's going to have railing, I believe. Is that not correct? Yeah, it's going to have railing around it, and they are going to use it as like an outdoor patio.
And how would that be accessed?
Through the house.
I don't see a door. Am I missing something? Is there a door going to be added into the side of the house that?
On that side.
On the second floor, so you don't step through the window to get on top of the carport, although you could.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lynn. There's currently a floor.
State your name for the record,
Oh,
please.
I'm sorry. I'm Sherry Cicino. I'm the owner of the house with my husband, Ron, who's back here. We have floor-to-ceiling windows now, and we're replacing one window with a hurricane door, so we can go out and step onto the balcony outside.
Okay.
And so it'll be able to withstand the weight of people, but.
I see it now in the rendering which we don't have it in here, but I see it now, the door.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. So is this, the carport, is this wide enough for one car, I assume?
Yes.
And this has nothing to do with, this is more for my curiosity, but in the picture, there's like a banyan tree in front of that, kind of?
There is
Even laurel?
It is a, what's it? It's
Sea grate.
No, it's not a secret.
Large, well, in front of the carport or in front of the house?
In front of the carport area, I think. Big.
It would be in front of, yeah, that tree will be taken out, and it is I know, but it's actually a nuisance tree. It's
I have one in my backyard.
Brazilian pepper, I think.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a.
It is lovely.
Even laurel, maybe. It's a type of banyan. Anyway, but it's a big old tree.
Yeah.
So you're going to take that out. I figured you probably would have to.
Yeah, we have to, otherwise we can't use the carport.
So, that's just for my own curiosity.
Yeah,
Anyway.
the carport's needed. I have an electric car, and my dashboard recently melted, so I need to. Hopefully people don't realize that happens, but it does. So.
Okay. I I don't think, I don't have any other questions myself. I, you know, any of the folks have anything with Ms. Cicino?
I'm good.
And I know, I guess eventually we're going to talk about the tax issue. That is that next.
The next one.
Yes, but I think it's the first one we've seen, so I applaud you that you're doing that. So at least we get an actual practical expectation of what it actually means. Okay, so that's good. All right, anybody have a motion?
I'll move to approve the requested certificate of appropriateness for case number 24053. I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Member Young?
Yes.
Member Hawkinsmith?
Yes.
Member Daschle?
Yes.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really do thank you. Your house is great, and we love to see that stuff. That's why it's an easy sell when you come in here, you know?
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going back to our next discussion item here. Hold on.
We need two motions. The local designation.
We did that
I
already.
thought we did that.
Together, the COA, and then
We did the local designation first before you presented the COA application.
But you do have something else on the very back page I don't understand.
No, it's just the wrong case number,
Okay.
24053.
Okay, so next here in action items,
Yeah,
we have 4C, which is the ad valorem tax exemption on 2507 Pasquarel Way. Brandon?
And this is a quick one. The action that you took on the certificate of appropriateness effectively did this, but we would just like a formal recommendation because we don't get many ad valorem tax exemptions. They tend to be more common in other jurisdictions. I spoke with the owner. They are looking to move forward with the ad valorem tax exemption under the scope of the work that they were just approved for. This would apply to the ad valorem tax increase from the scope of work that was just approved. It wouldn't be for the entire structure. And that would be for up to 10 years. It would apply at in the tax year following the completion of improvements. If you make a recommendation on this, it will go forward to the city commission. From there, it goes on to the county. We will check over we will inspect the property once the work's complete to make sure it's in line with the certificate of appropriateness you just approved. But if you make a recommendation, if it moves on and is ultimately approved, they would be eligible for that ad valorem exemption. I think in the staff report I might have missed a comma or a single digit, but it works out to be about $1,570 per year for 10 years. Per $100,000 in improvements. So.
Okay. Do you know, and this again, this is because the first one we've seen, when 10 years comes around, do they just change the tax based on that addition that was, they don't redo the whole house at that point?
It's an adjustment just based on the addition, like as if nothing had, they had not been exempt for 10 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. I assumed that was the case. All right, so what do we have to do? We're just making a motion?
I'll make a motion.
It's on the agenda.
I move to approve the requested ad valorem tax exemption pending successful completion of the work proposed under Certificate of Appropriateness 25053.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call, please.
Member Young?
Yes.
Member Hawkinsmith?
Yes.
Member Daschle?
Yes.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you so much.
Can I just add?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just want to just add that working with Brandon and Lynn was an exceptional experience. They would really care and were very thorough, and helped me along. As I called Bill first to find out what to do, and he says,
I feel
call
like
Brandon.
I've done something
And
that was them.
Well,
but no.
yeah, you introduced me to Brandon, so that worked out. So,
right.
but thank you. And I was
great.
going to do this before Brandon stood up and thanked everybody, just so you know.
All right. Now you've started.
But thank you all for everything.
Yeah,
Thank
certainly.
you.
Okay, so now we're at 4D, Certificate of Appropriateness for the demolition, Certificate 24056 for the demolition of the home located at 2500 Sunset Way. Ms. Rossetti?
Yes, let me see if I can scroll this. No. Oh, thank you.
It's kind of nice having
I do too. You're going to make this.
There's two.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Good afternoon again. This particular application is for a certificate of appropriateness for demolition at 2500 Sunset Way. This is a single-family residential property, case number 24056. And it's owned by PJ and Lisa McGovern. And I would have to say that also you were given a handout from their architect or designer, and I had had a long conversation with him, talking to him about historic preservation. And, you know, whenever I talk to anybody who wants to demolish their property, we have a long discussion about, you know, possible alternatives that they could take and things like that. So in this case, you know, he understood what I was talking about, but it's a narrow lot, and apparently they are concerned about the house's future with relationship to storms. I don't know if he's here or not. So he will, I'm sure, be wanting to present and talk to you and present what he feels are reasons for this demolition. So this is a house that is also a part of the National Register. It's a contributing structure in the National Register Historic District. On the exhibits, we've got a zoning map. This property is also RU2 residential urban and PAG, like the last property. The aerial photograph, that aerial photograph it's incorrect. I did not change that out. It is on the other side, on the Gulf side. It is in a narrow lot. I believe I have attached a copy of the survey in the staff report. For photographs, this house, as you can, takes up almost all of the side-to-side property of, you know, of where it's sitting on the lot. There's not a lot of room to navigate between the property line and the house. In addition, I was not able to get any photos on the beach because I couldn't find a beach walkover that was close enough to it. And also, so I took photos of property in the sides showing how there wasn't any access and I couldn't get through to take photos from the beach. So these the photographs that you see are of the house, and then also its neighbors. The gray house in your handout is the neighbor to the north, and you can see one more house to the north is a larger, taller structure. The same thing is true to the right or to the south, and you have a lower house, or a similar house that's a one-story house next to it, but then next to that there is another taller, newer house. So there is some intrusion into this part of the neighborhood with newer houses that are meeting the current floodplain requirements. There also, the last photograph shows how close this existing house, the subject house that we are looking at today for demolition, and the house next door, they're very close. So in issuing demo, or looking at demo permits, we have to take a look at the architectural or historic significance of the building, the importance of the building to the character of a district, the difficulty or impossibility of reproducing such a building, whether or not it's one of the last remaining examples of its kind in the neighborhood or city, and whether reasonable measures can be taken to save the building, and whether the building is capable of earning a reasonable economic return, and considering its physical condition, its location, and the anticipated expense of rehabilitation would be economically feasible. One of the things that kept coming up in discussion with the owner's agent was the fact that it's at grade or just slightly above grade, and they are very concerned about flooding issues, especially being on the Gulf of Mexico. And rather than, they had some problems with the wood being deteriorating as such. These things are addressed in the letter, and I will let the applicant discuss that rather than me sit here and try and framework his, the reasons for why the property owner wants to go ahead and do this. So staff is recommending approval, however, of the requested COA, Certificate of Appropriateness for demolition for this property, this 24056 case number for this contributing residential structure to the Paso Grill National Register Historic District. This property is located at 2500 Paso Grill Way, and staff does recommend, though, that any demolition approval be conditioned upon the Historic Preservation Board's approval of the related residential design review. So I put a recommended motion on the back of this document, which I move to approve the requested certificate of appropriateness for the demolition, case number 24056, as a residential structure at 2500 Paso Grill Way. And then also, in closing, I'd like to add that we know that we don't have any means really to deny a demolition. We can, but only for a short period of time. So unless the particular design review is not approved, then I think that it would be probably appropriate, or there's not a lot of option for us to make a denial. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lynn, can you just confirm this is a contributing structure and not a structure with local historic designation? This is a contributing structure but does not have local designation.
Correct. It was never locally designated, but it is part of the National Register Historic District. And I think, as we've talked before, if it is a contributing structure in the district, that means it is on the National Register of Historic Places as a contributing structure to the NR district. Thank you.
I'm asking for reasons of, a stay of execution is either 30 days or longer, depending on one designation or another.
Correct. Correct.
And it says, it's not the last man standing of its kind, so the onus is really on the last man standing of its kind, and how many more of these do we have?
Or, you may, as you had a workshop earlier today, there may be other things that you all may want to look at as far as changes in regulations, perhaps. But right now, the way our regulations are, we really don't have a mechanism to stop a demolition for the most part. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Holly.
I was going to say, since the owners have indicated that they are not interested in repairing or rehabbing this particular house, and they have indicated that they would like to work with the board in having the new structure fit into the environment, I'm going to make a motion to approve the requested certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of case number 24056 of a residential structure at 2500 Paso Grill Way, conditioned on the board's approval of a related residential design review, which is case 23081.
24051, I believe.
Yeah. I will second that motion, but I just want to point out to Mr. McCoy, is that who's back there? Yeah, I think everyone's read your letter, and so we know in detail the diligence you went through to make this decision. And I think we're just trying to save time of what's the obvious. And so, but I will tell you that I appreciate what you've done in explaining all these things. It makes it easier for us to do some of these things. All right. So thank you on that. As I said, I've made a motion, second the motion. So if you want to go ahead and do a roll call.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith?
Approved.
Member Daschle?
Yes.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Member Young?
Yes.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so now that brings us to, I guess the next thing is actually 4C, excuse me, 4E, I need new glasses. The naming of, and we'll get back to the discussion item on Mr. McCoy in just a moment on your situation, okay? So this would be 4E, the naming of 900 Gulf Way as First Sergeant Harry Metz Square. My understanding is this is being presented to us to essentially make a recommendation to the commission. So I don't know if someone from the staff is going to talk about this or who's going to go forward with this. Or go ahead.
There was a request to the commission to rename the square, so we thought it appropriate to take it to this board in the historic district to see if that would be something that you would be supportive of. And then when we take it to commission, we would include that in the agenda report, whatever decision that you all make.
Okay, is there anyone here to speak on this issue before we start discussing it?
I do have a public comment, but
You
after
do?
you're done.
Okay.
Terry Grocott, 2841 Alton Drive. I just want to say, as you consider the recommendation, I just ask that you look into the future and consider others who may follow in Mr. Metz's example of outstanding citizenry. Should you decide to recommend the approval of this, I ask that you also consider erecting a perpetual memorial with in conjunction with this. We're going to run out of parks, I'll say that. And I expect that we will have follow-on citizens who also do outstanding things in representing our city, representing our country, and will have recommendations come forward like this. And I think this is an opportunity to say, Mr. Metz exemplifies all of those qualities that we find outstanding, and this is an opportunity to say, here is a park that we've named after him, and here is a plaque, something in bronze or something like that, and then something you can add names to say this is the people that follow in his footsteps. So it's just a way to think forward and not just of this case in one instance, and so I just bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so as far as a little discussion about this, the first observation that I would make is, right, we have limited facilities. I can't even think of his name. Who's the guy that started the Pastor Girl Hotel with the French name?
Augie.
No, wait. Back in 1898 or.
Oh, okay.
Why is it not coming to me?
Yeah, well, anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wish I could.
Follow me.
Yeah. So the guy that started Pastor Girl recently, like 125 years ago.
Lazat.
Lazat, yes, Mr. Lazat. Has nothing named after him, I don't think. So, we kind of got to be careful as to who we decide should be, considered memorialized. Nothing against Harry Metz. His service was great. My point is, I think at this stage, what we essentially have is we have 2 letters saying, recommending or asking we do this, one email saying don't, and one citizen who says be careful with it. And it seems to me that we aren't in a position to make a recommendation without having a lot more information from the citizens about if this is something they really want to do or not, because that location, which I think is where the Paradise Grill is, really that's the foundation of the old Pastor Grill Hotel that burnt down. There's no memorial aspect for that, and so I think I'm not prepared to make any kind of a recommendation to the commission with this little work being put into whether this is something that the entire citizens of Paso Grill want. If the whole historic district said, oh, yes, this is something we should do, then I might say, okay. But if it's just a couple people asking, who I'm not even sure live in Paso Grill, is that really something that we want to do? Again, no offense to Mr. Metz, he was a great guy, as much as I knew him, but, you know, we do have limited areas, I think, to be naming things, and maybe a plaque, that's why we just need to discuss this, maybe a wall of fame or something at Paradise Grill would make sense, where we could add people with plaques, or, you know, there's people that they have dedicated benches on the beach, which are nice things to do as well, that memorialize the folks. But to take that whole section and name it after a person that, although contributed a lot to Paso Grill, you know, I don't want to get in one of these games where who knows who has more popularity than the other one, or who did more than the other guy. And, you know, in the future, 30 years from now, maybe somebody, the president of the United States, will be born on Paso Grill. Can we rename that after him then? Or I just think it's difficult decisions to be making about those things.
Jennifer, is there a process or certain criteria that we have in place, like the naming of the bridge and the naming of other parks? Was there any?
There was a resolution passed that we were able to pull up on when we have done this in the past, but it doesn't give a criteria.
And then as far as existing memorials to add names to, we have something on Upham Beach, and isn't there something at the Shuffleboard Court too?
Shuffleboard.
Yeah, I think there's a dedication to a woman that did a lot to keep the Shuffleboard Court together. I can't think of her name. There you go. Thank you. So,
And what, but how would this be memorialized? Would there be a sign, a plaque? And honestly, I didn't know that the Bayway Bridge was named the Command Sergeant Major Lee Littoral Medal of Honor Causeway and Bridge.
there's a sign.
This is the first time
There's a sign on the side of the road. You might not pay attention. You know, it's just.
Oh, there is.
There was a ceremony.
So I
that
didn't
was
even
FDOT.
know that. So I would guess, like, how would this
Well, that's
be memorialized?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. We don't really have any guidelines about it. We just have a suggestion. And I think, you know, we have to think this through a little bit, as opposed to just, you know, I don't know if you recall a couple of years ago when there was a proposal to take Paso Grill Park, the east end of that, and make it a National Medal of Honor reflection pool or something like that. And
So that project
moved, didn't it?
is going to McKinney Park, and it's going to be built with grant funding
Yeah,
in the
and that's
next
fine.
year.
But what I'm saying is, you know, things happen, like now that's where they stage all the equipment to fix the street. You know, so we have a limited amount of space. I know this isn't a situation, what are we talking about, a plaque or heading over the building itself? I mean, I just don't know what we're doing this, or how we're actually saying this. And so it seems to me we ought to maybe, as part of the historic board, we talk about plaques sometimes on people's individual houses, and I think it's, I don't have any issue at all with Mr. Metz being honored in some fashion, but I don't know if we want to be naming public structures after people, as opposed to maybe doing some sort of, as I said before, you know, a Hall of Fame plaque or something like that, because then it just becomes like popularity contests and who puts their name in first. So I would like to know a lot more about how the citizens feel about it before we would even consider making a recommendation.
I would like to add, only because, so I looked into this a little bit further. There is the honor walk at Upham Beach, and I discovered an article which was published May 12th of 1999, which says that officials are planning to use the park to honor people who have made contributions to the city in the military, by community work, as city employees, or through large donations. So I think that more or less the work has already been done as far as making the honor walk a place that we honor the people that were, you know, had significant contributions to our city, and also maybe served in a branch of the military, or maybe are with our fire department, or retired from our fire department, or our former police department, or city employees. So I think, kind of to piggyback on, to take a whole square and name it after one person, we are running out of city space. And why would we do that if there's already an honor walk the square in its totality, if I'm not mistaken, I did the Google Maps, it's 184 feet. The honor walk at Upham Beach is 1/10 of a mile. So that gives us a lot more space to be able to honor the people that did make significant contributions. And I was also thinking about it, and there might even be a way where if you go to the city's website and you click on the Upham Beach location and you have the honor walk, maybe to click on that and have a highlight of each person from the community that was represented there.
Biography of each
And
honoree.
who were they? Because, so I walked over to the shuffleboard court, my mom and I, and we looked, and the sign is beautiful for Trudy Perry. But if I was just a visitor coming to the community, I would be like, well, who's Trudy Perry? It's a great name. I'm sure she's a great lady, but I don't know what she did. So I think it's important, if we're going to be recognizing people, what was their contribution? What did they do? How did they serve our community and or our country? Because otherwise they're just a name and it kind of gets lost in translation. And I read through the article, which again was published May 12th of 1999. And sadly, none of the names that were mentioned are here any longer. And so then what, we have to go back in the archive and try to figure out who they were to our community. They shouldn't be forgotten, nor should the people that are recognized. So that's just my 2 cents.
Is there an honor walk application or?
I'm looking at it right now on our website. There's a form you fill out.
Well, wait.
Can we table this for,
Yeah, I think this is just discussion as we have right now, and there's a lot of things to look into. There's a lot of options, I think, that really aren't presented to us, and we need to take some time and think about it, because I would say this, and I think what Member Deschelle said is great, Dashell, pardon me, is about the honor walk, but Harry Metz was a Pass the Grill guy, you know what I mean, which is a historical thing, and so maybe it would make sense, to do something more localized in the historic district. I mean, that's what we're been asked as the historic district to make a decision, not as the city of St. Pete Beach. And so as we think about this, there might be something that we could, because we're going to keep getting these, I would imagine. I mean, I think someone wanted to rename the park, didn't they, recently?
The last park was Peg Creed, like 12 years ago.
No. I thought there was didn't somebody try to want to name it Harry Metz Park or something? Wasn't that, anyway, I don't remember.
No.
My point was, I'd like to see people be more satisfied with benches and trees than entire buildings, I suppose. And so I think, because there's, just limited space and people, and history goes on and on. So I would ask this, that the members of this board think about this, because this is the first thing we've kind of really talked about it, and perhaps at the next meeting next month, we can then maybe come up with some thoughts on how we might want to deal with it in more practical matters before we make a recommendation to the commission, including maybe notifying the citizens and getting some input from those individuals.
Do we have time for audience comment on this issue?
Sure. Step on up. Again, for the record, you got to state your name.
Yes.
Oh, well, unless you scream, but no.
Patricia Lopez, and something just popped into my mind. We have the History Museum there, and maybe do a brick walkway through the History Museum and have the person's name on that brick.
That's an excellent suggestion.
The History Museum could have something in there to correspond with each name. Okay.
That's a good idea. I mean, while we were talking about this, I was thinking about when Mary Pier was falling in, and I guess the money wasn't there to rebuild it, and so citizens were buying individual boards and putting their names on it, which was a nice community effort back 30 years ago. So does that make sense that maybe we just pass this to talk about it a little bit next month, and maybe someone can talk to the museum as well, if that opens doors?
I do think we need to establish some sort of criteria or formal process so we don't end up being accused of playing favors or racing to the finish for someone we love. But
I know the Historical Museum has been looking at bricks for a while in front of their building, and then also in Pass the Grill Park.
I do think it's still appropriate for Harry in the honor walk too, even if it's not
Sure.
there and maybe somewhere else as well,
Uh-huh.
but certainly qualifies for the honor walk too.
Okay.
And let's hope they use the old bricks and not anything now, right?
Engraving the old bricks.
Yeah. Okay, so is that, we'll get that passed the next week, next month to talk about that. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are back to a discussion item, number 5A, the design review 24051 on 2500 Sunset Way. And there's Brandon.
So, apologize for the typo in the staff report. It is 24051, not 23051. So, I just wanted to give a brief overview. We did take a look at both the zoning and the design of this. Our design consultant looked at the design of the building. They had only one recommendation, which was made the only substantive staff recommendation, was that the renderings, and I believe what went out with your packet may have actually been a map instead of renderings, but you can see the front of the structure. Sorry. Here, her concern was that the elevations in the building permit did not show the color of the garage door, and she just wanted to make sure that it was consistent with the color of the surrounding and that there weren't any disparate textures that would cause the garage door to stand out. That was a similar recommendation that was made for the design review last month. I did take a look at the zoning. The home is compliant with the house small zoning standard building type. This is a little bit unique property for the area. It's actually the only house small lot in the immediate vicinity. The major differences with that compared to a house medium, which is the typical type of lot that we bring forward, is that the side setbacks are 2 feet closer to the side property line. They're 3 instead of 5. It also allows the developer to get up to 5 feet closer to the front lot line at 5 feet instead of a minimum of 10. However, I did want to point out that the property or the designer did choose to set the home back further than the recommended 10-foot range for this property. He has the home set at about 13 feet from the front property line, and this is actually the reverse of what we typically see, but the homes to the north and the south are actually set closer to the street than the subject home will be. However, the home will be built at nearly the maximum height permitted for the zoning district. I did look at the zoning standards for the property. The landscaping looked fine. The setbacks, the other elements of the property all look like they met the zoning code. So I didn't have any recommendations for zoning. The recommendation from our design consultant was to request that the garage door be, not stand out, not in stark contrast to the rest of the home. And as always, I included this condition that if there were to be any major changes to the design of the building, that it be brought back to the board for reconsideration. I know that we do have Michael McCoy available, and if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
The only question I have, again, a lot of these questions I have is curiosity and know where we are compared to other houses and stuff. So what is the maximum, what is the highest point of this house? Being the peak of the roof in the center, just so I know for future reference. Sure. And I apologize if it's in there, I couldn't quite figure it out.
The ridge of the roof is just below 40 feet as measured from the ground, and that would be, it looks like it's about 39 feet. It's about a foot lower than it could be under the maximum height.
Thank you.
Trying to see if they have any details on the piling system here.
I was going to say,
they may know.
Oh, yeah, they don't, but that was a question I was going to have to Mr. McCoy just to see what he has to say. And also, this is just an observation. You realize the pictures of the Cecino's house also had the Porsche 911 in the picture that is depicted on the drawings of this. So
in the color rendering, it's red.
Yes, I'm glad to see that we only have those kind of cars down there. Okay, so anybody have questions for Brandon? I mean, these are pretty detailed, and there's quite a bit of explanation for it, much more than they, I would say, normally are. I guess I'll ask you this, Brandon, just because I think I do almost every time, but as far as the details, like the siding is kind of a shingle siding, and then I don't know what you call those tails that are like under the rafters on the outside. What are those called? Yeah, so I was going to say gingerbread, but whatever. As far as those kind of specific details that look so good, when we approve or the city approves the build out, is it going to be exactly that same thing? They still have to put the corbels in there. They have to put an arched, you know, in the back there's arched open areas.
Well, I'll talk just generally. Typically, there would be some staff discretion in that, or at least design consultant discretion. Now, I believe in this particular project, and Mr. McCoy can speak to this, I do believe this is ready to move forward, so I would assume you would be getting the design that you're seeing here exactly, but he can confirm that.
Well, I guess I was wondering how, like, for example, you know, if you look at, I'm looking at a picture that shows the west facade, so that's from the beach looking at it. And there's a gate, and the gate is surrounded by columns that look like they have, like, fieldstone or flagstone on them, okay? When it's built, do they have to have fieldstone or flagstone, or can they put, you know, stucco or something else? I mean, how detailed do these have to be when they're accepted, or how much can be changed when they're actually built, if at all?
So specifically for the gates and the fences, we do have material standards for that, so that would be something that we would generally expect to be as shown, but usually accessory elements are not part of the design review. It's specific to the home.
Okay. I'm just because, you know, because like I said, this is so detailed and it looks so good.
Are those flood vents in the wall too on that beach side? The little rectangle?
It looks like them, we could confirm.
They look more like lighting.
Oh, could be doggy doors. No, I'm just kidding, though. But yeah, well, we can ask Mr. McCoy. But okay, thank you, Brandon.
Good afternoon, Michael McCoy, McCoy Residential Designs, and I'm acting on behalf of the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. McGovern. Couple of things I do want to point out. As far as the garage door, and perhaps the reviewer didn't quite catch what's going on here, there's actually, and I don't know if we have a ground floor plan, but there's actually a carport. That garage door is 24 feet underneath the house. So you're not going to see, you're really not going to see the door.
I can see it, yeah.
And part of the reason we did it that way is to really soften the effect of having a narrow house with a garage door staring you right in the face.
So that's always going to be open like that.
So that's going to always be open.
I can
so
see
what
how
you're
the
seeing in that
details.
colored rendering, that angled rendering with the Porsche there, that's open. That's always going to be open. The door's actually set back about 22 or 24 feet.
That's an excellent,
Okay, so
excellent
that's
thing.
it's kind of a nice way to do it instead of just all garage. And then as far as the height, we're actually 9.5 inches lower than the maximum allowed, so we're trying to be sensitive to that. As far as, you know, you were questioning things like the rafters, you know, the rafter tails and the brackets and that sort of thing. I mean, it certainly is our intention that what I'm showing here is what is drawn. The client is in love with it, and they, you know, gave me the go ahead to do what, you know, creatively I felt was necessary. So they have no intention, as far as I know, of cheaping it up and taking things off. If they do, I'm going to have a problem with them.
Well, yeah, I just wonder from the city how much is enforceable on that kind of stuff.
And I do think since it has to go through the design review for the historic board, I do believe that the board, the building department, has some leeway if we start making changes. You know, any kind of sort of material changes to it that, you know, that we have to come back before you. If I'm correct, am I correct on that, Brandon? So, I mean, for instance, if we decide, hey, you know, the guy wants to put in a tile roof, I mean, that would be totally different. You know, we'd have to come back. But, you know, I'm trying my best with these new homes because I'm really sensitive to Pass the Grill. I've been doing a lot of work down here for years. And I'm very sensitive to the historic district and really sensitive to trying, when we have the opportunity to, you know, with an existing home, particularly that is contributing, to somehow salvage it, you know, renovate it, make it work. This was a totally kind of a mess of a house, to be honest with you. Several years ago, I did one where we actually lifted it. and built a garage underneath it and put a deck on the back of it. But it was a little box. It was pretty easy to do, and, and it met the owner's needs. So by trying to retain some of the character of coastal and cottage with, shingles and open rafters and things like that, just trying to maintain that character as best I can at Paso Grill. So I want to throw that out.
Yep.
If you have any questions, any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Are you using Telecom filings in your construction?
Yes. Yeah, when we get into these pile-supported foundations, you really have three options. You have wood-driven piles, which is probably used 95% of the time, auger cast, concrete, and then the other is helical piles, so screw piles. More often than not, especially with single-family, wood-driven piles that's what we do. And there's a lot of reasons. Primarily, they are definitely less expensive. I don't know the numbers. A contractor could, talk to that as far as the difference in price. But yeah, it's something we always run into. It doesn't matter if it's Pinellas County it doesn't matter if it's Clearwater Beach or here. It's always a mess with driven piles.
And do you know, only because the former speaker talked about how cooperative the guys were that were driving the pilings, do they have some sort of like insurance kind of scenario that they can take?
Honestly,
lets them do that. It'd be recognizing they're responsible for any kind of damage.
Maybe that's a good question.
I don't know if you do.
Honestly, don't know. I wish I did know that, but I really don't. Yeah, because there's a certain way. Obviously, have to drive them, and they have to drive it down to get the resistance, and it can definitely shake some structures.
Well, I have a question that has to do with the house, but it has to do with the owners. Do you know whether or not these people have owned that house for a long time, or their family has or not for a long time?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think they've owned it that long.
And the reason I ask that is only because some time ago I met some people that lived in one of those 2 or 3 houses right there, and they were telling me how their family had been there for like 3 generations as a home. And they had a bunch of old photographs. I was trying to see if I could get photographs.
Well, what's interesting is when I look at the Pinellas County appraiser site and I look at the history of permits, I don't find anything prior to, I think, 2001. So, the house out front, which I'm assuming is the original cottage because it's just sitting on the ground. Okay. And then it looks to me like there was an addition behind it that's elevated on pilings.
Right.
But I can't find anything on that.
If you talk to them and find out their generations have owned that house, tell them they're making copies of their photographs and stuff for them.
Yeah, I couldn't find too much when I was doing all my research on it.
Right.
But I know it was a rental situation too. It's so nice thing is we're just going back to single family. So it doesn't. It really unfortunate just wasn't really taken care of with the years.
Okay. Any other questions for this gentleman?
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we had some, do we have any other, there was a discussion item.
Workshop.
Yes. We also talked about, there was supposed to be on the, I think there was something about the garbage pickup update, but I think that's kind of rendered moot at this moment. So I'm not asking, and just because the city is approaching that in a different fashion, we're going to have a town hall meeting and stuff about that thing to get more input from folks before anything is done, is my understanding. So, okay, so we're talking about the workshop with the commissioners, and I don't know where we're at on that, Jennifer, or maybe you can just give us a feel for that.
I would say it's probably going to be not this month, Jenny, because there's a couple workshops the commission wanted.
You'd really have to ask the city clerk. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say sometime next month. But today was the first step.
Yeah, I get that.
Check.
Yeah. Do you know whether this, I can't think of what we call that thing where they send the evites out basically about certain days.
The doodle thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get with the city clerk on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Can I make a motion on this issue?
What issue?
Oh, no, it's just a discussion item.
It's just a
It's not
discussion
an
item.
agenda item.
Yeah, we're going to see that at a later date, I think, right? The design review? Or no?
It's a design case review.
We added it as a discussion item, so if you could still make a motion on that, just.
Okay, you want us to do that? Okay,
recommendations,
I was just confused about that. Okay, yes, please, Holly.
So I would like to move that we approve the design review case 23051 with 2 conditions. And those 2 conditions, I have my finger on it. Number 1, the garage door shall be designed and colored to remain indistinct from the surrounding structural elements. Number 2, major alterations to the residence while under construction, including significant exchange or alteration of facade materials, window design, or frontage elements or colors as determined by staff, shall require this case to return to the Historic Preservation Board.
I'm not going to, I'm going to clarify that for a minute, because I think the explanation was it doesn't really have a garage door. And so you define what that means.
It does, it has a garage and a carport, but it's
There is a
20 feet in.
garage door,
Yeah, but the garage door is recessed way back in there, correct? So,
but you could still see it from the street.
well,
It's not a common thing, I think, the reviewer might have been looking at it, thinking it was right on that facade, and it's not.
yeah, okay.
So the condition is just asking for it to disappear. It's not going to be painted purple or
All right,
something like that. It's just,
okay. And then, again, I don't know, I think we got to clarify again, what's the number here?
It's 24051.
Yeah, I think that was incorrect on what you read, Holly.
Oh.
So that's the typo. So, okay, so it's the motion's on 24051. Okay, I'll second the motion then. Roll call, please.
Member Young?
yes.
Vice Chair Hockensmith?
Yes.
Member Daschle?
Yes.
Member Hurley?
Yes.
Chair Lowry?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, sorry, I was confused on that we didn't have to do the motion then. So now I guess we've actually done all the business we have of today, right? So our next meeting is October 3rd, and